The mall opened its doors early that morning, and light poured through the wide glass roof and warmed the tiled floors. People moved in slow waves between stores while music played softly from hidden speakers. Mira walked alone with calm steps and watched the colors and motion around her. She did not speak, but she listened with her eyes and felt the rhythm of the place through movement and sound. She liked coming early when the mall felt gentle and less crowded. She held a small notebook close to her chest, and it made her feel safe and ready. Mira had lived with silence since childhood, and she had learned many ways to move through the world without fear. She read faces carefully and noticed details others missed. She noticed how a smile could mean kindness or how a quick glance could mean trouble. She wore simple clothes and her hair was tied back neatly. She enjoyed window displays and often stopped to admire things she could not buy. Her joy came from small moments and quiet thoughts. She paused near a clothing store and looked at a blue dress displayed behind the glass. She imagined how the fabric would feel and how the color would look under sunlight. As she stood there, she felt the buzz of the mall grow stronger as more people arrived. Families passed by and friends laughed and workers hurried with cups of coffee. Mira felt comfortable in her own space and turned toward a quieter hallway that led to a bookshop. At the same time, a man named Ron leaned against a pillar not far away. He watched the crowd with restless eyes and waited without purpose. Ron felt tired of the day already and blamed the world for his mood. When he noticed Mira walking alone, his attention stayed on her. He saw her silence and assumed it meant she would not resist or be noticed. He did not think about her feelings or her strength. He only thought about himself. Ron followed at a distance as Mira walked down the hallway. His steps echoed lightly on the floor and mixed with the distant sounds of the mall. Mira sensed a change behind her, and her shoulders stiffened. She did not turn right away, but her pace slowed. She looked at the shop windows to stay calm, but her reflection showed a figure moving closer. Her heart beat faster, and she held her notebook tighter. She turned into a smaller space near a closed store, hoping to let the man pass. Instead, Ron stepped in front of her and blocked her way. His shadow fell across the floor and made the space feel smaller. Mira stopped and looked up at him with wide eyes. She raised her hands slowly and tried to sign that she wanted to pass and that she did not want trouble. Ron frowned because he did not understand or did not care. Ron spoke loudly and demanded her bag. His voice sounded harsh in the quiet hallway and drew a few distant looks. Mira shook her head and stepped back until she felt the wall behind her. She tried to stay calm and pointed to her ears and then to her mouth to explain her silence. Her movements were clear and careful, but Ron grew more impatient. Mira opened her notebook and began to write quickly, hoping words would help where signs did not. Her hands trembled slightly as she wrote a simple sentence asking him to leave her alone. Before she could show it to him, Ron reached toward the bag on her shoulder. The notebook slipped from her hands and fell to the floor with a soft sound. Mira felt fear rise, but she stood her ground and looked around for help. People walked past the hallway entrance and some noticed the tension, but none stepped closer yet. They were unsure of what they saw and did not want to interfere. Mira wished she could call out, but she knew she could not. Instead, she met Ron's eyes with quiet strength and shook her head again. She took a slow breath and reminded herself to stay aware and focused. What Mira did not know was that only a short distance away, Officer Ben was walking through the mall on routine duty. He had walked these halls many times and knew the patterns of crowds and silence. At his side walked Rex, a strong police dog trained to notice changes others missed. Rex moved with calm confidence and watched people carefully as they passed. As Ben and Rex turned a corner, Rex suddenly slowed. His ears lifted and his body grew alert. He sensed fear carried on the air and pulled gently on the leash. Ben noticed the change and followed Rex's lead without question. Together they moved toward the quieter hallway where Mira stood facing Ron. The mall lights reflected off the floor as Ben stepped closer and took in the scene. He saw Mira pressed near the wall and Ron standing too close. He raised his voice with authority and told Ron to step back. Rex stood firm and still beside him and watched Ron closely. The presence of the officer and the dog changed the air in the hallway at once. Ron turned and saw them, and his confidence faded. He stepped away from Mira and lifted his hands slightly. Mira felt her knees weaken with relief, and she bent to pick up her notebook. Her eyes filled with tears, but she stayed composed. She looked at Ben and then at Rex and nodded slowly in thanks. Ben spoke calmly and asked Mira if she was safe. She wrote a short message in her notebook and showed it to him. He read it and nodded with understanding and respect. Shoppers began to gather at a distance, and the hallway felt lighter as tension faded. As Ron was guided away, Mira leaned against the wall and took a deep breath. She felt tired but proud of herself for staying strong. She closed her notebook and held it close again. The mall sounds returned to normal and life continued around her. Mira knew this moment would stay with her, but she also knew she was not alone in the world, even in silence. The hallway slowly filled with quiet movement as people returned to their own paths and the moment of tension softened. Mira stood still for a while and let her breathing settle as her hands stopped shaking. Officer Ben stayed nearby to make sure she felt safe, and Rex sat calmly beside him like a silent guard. Mira looked at the dog and felt a sense of comfort that surprised her. She had always loved animals because they understood feelings without words. Ben asked gentle questions and Mira answered by writing in her notebook with care. She explained that she was mute and had been shopping alone when the man followed her. Ben listened closely and nodded with patience and respect. He made sure she knew she did nothing wrong and that help had arrived at the right time. Mira felt warmth in her chest because she felt seen and understood. The mall security team arrived and spoke briefly with Ben. Ron was taken away and the hallway returned to normal light and sound. Mira watched as he disappeared from view and felt a mix of relief and sadness. She wished people would learn to see silence as strength and not weakness. She took another deep breath and closed her notebook slowly. Ben asked Mira if she wanted someone called or if she needed a place to rest. Mira shook her head gently and wrote that she would like to sit for a few minutes. Ben guided her to a nearby bench near a fountain where water flowed in smooth patterns. The sound of water felt calming and Mira focused on it as her thoughts slowed. Rex lay down near her feet and rested his head on his paws. Mira smiled softly and reached out to touch his fur with care. Rex wagged his tail once and stayed still so she would feel safe. Mira felt tears form again, but this time they were not from fear. They were from gratitude and release. As Mira sat there, she thought about her life and the many times she had faced misunderstanding. She remembered teachers who had spoken too fast and strangers who had looked away. She also remembered kind faces and small acts of care that helped her move forward. This moment joined those memories and reminded her that help could appear when least expected. Ben stood a short distance away and gave Mira space while still watching over her. He believed in quiet support and trusted Rex to stay alert. People passed by, and some glanced at the dog with curiosity. Children smiled and pointed, and parents guided them along. The mall felt alive again, and Mira felt part of it instead of separate. After some time, Mira stood up and wrote another message for Ben. She thanked him again and told him she felt ready to go. Ben smiled and told her she was strong and brave. Mira nodded and placed her notebook back into her bag with care. She gave Rex one last gentle pat and turned toward the main hall. As she walked, Mira noticed details she had missed earlier. She saw sunlight reflecting off glass and heard laughter echo between stores. She felt grounded and alert and proud of herself. Her steps were steady and her head was held high. She knew the fear would fade, but the lesson would stay. She stopped near the bookshop she had planned to visit before everything changed. She hesitated for a moment and then walked inside. The smell of paper and ink welcomed her and made her smile. She browsed shelves slowly and ran her fingers along the spines of books. Reading had always been her bridge to the world. While Mira explored the shop, Ben and Rex continued their patrol. Ben felt satisfied knowing the situation had ended well. Rex walked with his usual focus and calm strength. Ben believed moments like these showed the importance of presence and awareness. He hoped Mira would remember not the fear but the support that followed. Mira chose a small book and carried it to the counter. The cashier smiled and Mira smiled back and paid quietly. She wrote a short thank you note when the cashier complimented her choice. The exchange felt simple and kind, and that mattered to her. She left the shop feeling lighter. Outside the store, Mira paused and looked around the mall once more. She no longer felt watched or threatened. She felt capable and aware and ready to continue her day. The notebook in her bag felt like a trusted friend. She adjusted the strap on her shoulder and moved toward the exit. As Mira walked, she passed a mirror and caught her own reflection. She saw not fear but strength in her eyes. She nodded to herself and continued forward. The mall doors opened and fresh air greeted her. She stepped outside knowing that silence did not mean weakness and that courage could exist without sound. Mira stepped out of the mall and paused near the wide entrance where people came and went. The air outside felt cooler and helped clear her thoughts. She stood still for a moment and watched cars move and people talk and laugh. Her heart was calmer, but her mind was active. She knew the event inside the mall had changed something in her. She walked toward the bus stop across the open space and sat on a bench. The bench was worn but clean and faced the road. Mira placed her bag beside her and rested her hands on her lap. She looked at the sky and noticed soft clouds moving slowly. The quiet moment allowed her to reflect. Mira thought about how fear had entered her day without warning. She remembered the hallway and the wall behind her and the feeling of being trapped. She also remembered how she stayed calm and aware. She realized she had protected herself in the best way she could. That realization gave her strength. As she waited, she opened her notebook and began to write. She wrote about the moment and how it made her feel. Writing helped her understand emotions that were hard to carry. She wrote about Rex and how the dog sensed her fear. She wrote about Ben and his calm voice and respectful eyes. A woman sitting nearby noticed Mira writing and smiled politely. Mira looked up and returned the smile. There was no need for words between them. The woman nodded and looked away again. Mira appreciated the simple kindness. The bus arrived and Mira stood and boarded it with steady steps. She found a seat near the window and sat down. As the bus moved, she watched the city pass by. Buildings and trees blended into patterns of motion. She felt connected to the world around her. Her thoughts returned to the mall, and she wondered how many people felt unseen like she once had. She wished for a world where silence was understood and respected. She believed change started with awareness and kindness. She hoped her calm strength had been noticed. At the same time, Officer Ben was finishing his shift at the mall. He walked Rex to a quiet area and offered him water. Rex drank and then sat patiently. Ben rested his hand on the dog's back and felt pride. He believed Rex had done what he was trained to do and more. Ben thought about Mira and hoped she was safe and calm. He respected her courage and composure. He knew many people would panic in such moments. He admired her ability to stay present. He made a note to share the experience with his team as a reminder of why they served. Back on the bus, Mira reached her stop and stepped off. She walked toward her apartment building with familiar steps. The path was lined with trees and small shops. She greeted the owner of a fruit stand with a nod. The owner nodded back warmly. Mira entered her building and climbed the stairs slowly. She unlocked her door and stepped inside her small home. The space was neat and filled with personal touches. Books lined the shelves and plants sat near the window. The room felt safe and welcoming. She set her bag down and removed her shoes. She sat at her table and placed the notebook in front of her. She continued writing and described the emotions she felt after leaving the mall. She wrote about fear fading and strength growing. She wrote about gratitude. As the light outside shifted, Mira made tea and sat near the window. She watched the city quiet as evening approached. She felt tired but peaceful. She knew the memory would stay, but it no longer frightened her. She decided to share her experience with her community group online. The group was made of people who shared stories through writing and signs. Mira typed carefully and explained what had happened. She focused on strength and awareness rather than fear. She wanted her story to inspire. Responses came slowly and then more quickly. People thanked her for sharing. Some shared similar experiences. Others offered support and encouragement. Mira felt connected and supported. She realized her voice existed through words and actions. Later that evening, Mira stood in front of her mirror again. She practiced deep breathing and gentle movements. She reminded herself that she was capable and alert. She touched her notebook and smiled. She knew she would carry it with her always. Across the city, Ben returned home and removed his uniform. He fed Rex and sat quietly beside him. He thought about the many people he met in his job. Some days were hard and some days were rewarding. This day reminded him why he chose this path. Rex rested his head on Ben's knee and closed his eyes. Ben smiled and scratched his ear. He whispered a soft thank you, knowing Rex felt it through touch and tone. The bond between them was strong and built on trust. As night settled, Mira prepared for rest. She placed her notebook on her bedside table. She turned off the light and lay down. Her thoughts were calm and steady. She felt proud of herself and grateful for unexpected help. She closed her eyes, knowing tomorrow would bring new moments. She knew she would walk through the world with awareness and confidence. Silence was part of her, but it did not define her limits. Strength lived within her actions and choices. The city rested under the night sky, and lives continued quietly. Mira slept peacefully with a steady heart. Ben slept knowing he had made a difference. Rex slept dreaming of walks and duty. And the story moved forward toward a new day. Morning light entered Myra's room through the window and gently woke her from sleep. She opened her eyes and lay still for a moment, listening to the quiet sounds of the city. She felt rested and clear and ready for the day ahead. The memory of the mall returned, but it no longer carried fear. It felt like a lesson she had accepted. Mira rose from her bed and followed her usual routine with calm movements. She washed her face and made simple breakfast and watered her plants. Each small action grounded her and reminded her of control. She liked mornings because they felt full of possibility. Silence felt peaceful rather than heavy. After breakfast, Mira sat at her table and opened her notebook. She reread what she had written the night before. Her words showed growth and strength and honesty. She decided to add one more page about hope. She wrote that courage does not always shout and that help can arrive quietly. Later that morning, Mira left her apartment to attend a local community meeting. The meeting was for people who shared stories through writing, signs, and art. It was a place where she felt accepted. She walked with confidence and greeted familiar faces with smiles and nods. At the meeting, Mira shared her story by reading from her notebook. The room was quiet and attentive. People watched her hands and her expressions with care. When she finished, many nodded and some clapped softly. Mira felt proud and supported. One woman approached her afterward and thanked her for sharing. She said Myra's story gave her courage. Mira smiled and wrote a short reply expressing gratitude. Moments like this reminded her that her voice mattered. She felt connected to something larger than herself. Meanwhile, Officer Ben began his day at the station. He reviewed reports and prepared for his shift. He thought briefly about Mira and hoped she was doing well. He believed stories like hers deserved to be heard. He shared the experience with a fellow officer as a reminder of awareness. Rex waited patiently by Ben's side, ready for duty. He sensed Ben's calm mood and matched it. They headed out together to serve the community. Ben trusted Rex completely and valued their partnership. Back at the community center, Mira helped arrange chairs and clean tables. She enjoyed being useful and present. She noticed how people worked together without judgment. The space felt safe and warm. She realized she wanted to contribute more often. That afternoon, Mira walked through a park near her home. Children played and birds moved between trees. She sat on a bench and watched the world with gentle attention. She felt gratitude for simple beauty. The past days had deepened her appreciation for peace. She opened her notebook and began sketching ideas for a short written piece. She wanted to create something that could help others feel seen. She planned to share it online and at future meetings. Creativity gave her purpose and joy. As the sun lowered, Mira returned home and prepared dinner. She moved slowly and mindfully. She felt balanced and content. She knew growth did not erase fear but transformed it. That knowledge gave her confidence. That evening, Ben finished his shift and walked Rex through a quiet neighborhood. He reflected on his work and the people he protected. He believed every act of care mattered, even small ones. Rex walked steadily beside him, alert and calm. Ben thought about how different lives crossed briefly and left lasting impact. Mira had reminded him of strength beyond sound. He hoped society would grow kinder and more aware. He believed change began with respect. Night settled and Mira prepared for rest. She placed her notebook beside her bed once more. She wrote one final sentence about the day and closed the book. Her heart felt full. She lay down and looked at the ceiling, smiling softly. She felt no anger or fear, only understanding. She knew she would face challenges again, but she also knew she could handle them. Silence did not limit her spirit. Across the city, Ben rested after a long day. Rex slept nearby, breathing slowly. Peace filled their home. Both felt ready for whatever tomorrow might bring. The city lights glowed softly as people slept and dreamed. Lives continued to move and grow. Mira slept knowing she was strong and visible. Her story did not end with fear but with growth and hope.